I want you to imagine a classroom. This is a high school classroom, and inside there are whiteboards, desks, books, warm August light filtering in through the windows. It is the first day of freshman year, and this classroom is filled with a very specific student demographic. All of these students are first-generation immigrants of Hispanic descent. Now, I want you to take a guess. I want to see some hands up. What percentage of these students do you think will get a bachelor's degree in their lifetime? Does anybody want to take a guess? Anyone? Yeah? 40%. 40%. Does anybody want to challenge that? 10%. That's really, you're really pessimistic, huh? 5%. Wow. A lot more? How much?
I'm going to say 75%.
75%. The answer is, you were very close, 12.5%. You heard that right, 12.5. And that statistic repeats itself for many other first-generation immigrant groups as well. Now imagine if somebody told me that while I was suspended 30,000 feet in the air on a plane from Moscow to Chicago at the age of 9. I'm a first-generation immigrant as well. Now, nobody believes me when I say that because I have no accent, I know, but I drink tea, drink kvass, eat borscht, play hockey, and walk my pet bear just as much as any other Russian. That's a joke. I don't actually drink kvass. My family and I came to the United States with the same dream many other immigrants do, the American dream. And my personal American dream was to study, get an education here, and become a professional in the United States. Okay, my real dream was to be a race car driver, but this was a close second. En route to that dream, I have been through elementary school, junior high, high school, and now find myself in the final year of the Bachelor of Architecture program at the Illinois Institute of Technology. And from where I am now, I can tell you that this number we just talked about, 12.5, it's real. By real, I don't mean its factuality. I mean, yes, it's a fact. But I'm talking about the way a number, a statistics, manifests itself in our hearts and our minds. See, statistics are cold. Statistics are conceptual and impersonal. But that sinking feeling in your stomach when you get to the senior year of high school and you stare into the sublime abyss of the college application process, when your parents know less about it than you do, when your counselor seems to see you as an ID number and nothing else, when the internet is blinding you with thousands of irrelevant options, when you realize that that dream you've been hanging on to since the age of 9 could very well be unachievable, that feeling isn't cold, it isn't conceptual, it isn't impersonal, it isn't impersonal. It is so very terrifying and so very real. Now, my struggle isn't unique, and for that reason, I spoiled the plot a little earlier. Yes, I got into college. But I got in with this feeling that I had some unfinished business left. Fortunately, this is where the most exciting part of the journey began, when an interdisciplinary team consisting of myself and 3 other students decided to take this issue head on. We all came from immigrant families, and we all knew that there were significant barriers to getting into, and more importantly, completing college. Sure, there were financial barriers, language barriers, but if it was that simple, if that's all there was to it, why is it that more than 25% of first-generation immigrant students with a grade point average of 3.5 or higher, that's more or less an A average, were not getting into college? Their English was superb. Their grades made them eligible for countless scholarships. So why? Why were a quarter of those dreams lost? Turns out that the missing piece of the puzzle is actually not the student, it's the parent. In 2010, the Parent Institute published a statistic. 64% of differences in academic achievement from student to student are attributed to parental support for academic achievement. That means that the more a parent participates in a child's education, the better that child will do. And that this involvement is the most significant factor in that child's success. And as we had feared, in 2012, research showed that immigrant parents participated in school-related events half as much as US-born parents. Now, does that mean that immigrant parents are terrible parents and that they don't care about their kids? No, of course not. But to find the reasoning behind the trend, on an unreasonably hot day this past August, I sat down with an immigrant mother named Lena as her son Vladimir, a senior in high school, was unpacking some school supplies for the upcoming year. Lena admitted that she hardly ever spoke to her son's teachers, dean, or counselor. She felt uncomfortable, out of place at parent-teacher conferences. She did not have any faith in the school faculty's ability to understand Vladimir's interests and college options. And of course, she had no idea of how to go about the college application process. But how could she, if her only source of guidance did not feel trustworthy. So if cultural and language barriers breed distrust and disengagement in parents, and if this disengagement lowers parental involvement, and if this lowered involvement decreases a child's chances of success in both class and college application, we needed to create an environment, a time and place for parents and faculty to meet and genuinely interact. And the forced formality of a dry, uncomfortable firing squad of a parent-teacher conference was just not going to cut it. Fortunately, if there's anything architecture students like myself are taught to do, that's to design environments. And to design ours, I turned to my training in urbanism and the teachings of Jane Jacobs, a mid-20th century urban critic, author, and activist who shed light on one of the most effective and one of the most comfortable methods of in-person communication. She called it low-commitment interaction. Now, what is low-commitment interaction? I'll start off by telling you what it isn't. When my family and I came to the United States, we were struck by how friendly Americans were. Everyone was always smiling. Whenever you ask, how's it going? It's always going great. Everyone was so nice. It scared the crap out of us. Imagine my mother, who felt so out of place when she got here that she was afraid to pick up the phone. And here comes Mrs. Smith from across the street, beaming from ear to ear, yelling at the top of her lungs, "Hi, you're our new neighbor. Why don't you come over for dinner? It would be so nice to get to know you." We suburban dwellers are familiar with this kind of formality. It makes sense to us. But there are several things that make it super high commitment and super uncomfortable for someone of a different culture, someone who may not yet feel like they belong. One, in the idea of coming over for dinner, you quite literally get locked inside of somebody else's house. And so should you get socially exhausted, there are no escapes, not without the fear of being judged or coming off as impolite. Two, socializing can seem like a daunting concept to someone who may not yet be proficient in the language. And three, the idea of getting to know someone typically involves sharing personal information upon request, sharing that takes trust in the person you're interacting with, trust that you might not yet have. So that means that low commitment interaction has to be the opposite of all of these things. It has to occur in an open environment where not only is it easy to come and go as you please, but you're actually expected to come and go rather than linger for a long time. A good example of this is running into your neighbor while you're walking along the sidewalk. You both have places to be, but exchange a few words as you pass by each other. Secondly, the interaction should not focus on personal matters, at least not from the very start. And most importantly, there should be some other activity that takes priority over socialization over the course of interaction. Now, before I give you an example of these ideas at work, I have a confession to make to you all. I am an introvert. I understand that I am saying that from a stage to a room of 100 people. But the truth is that I am terrified of every last one of you. It's nothing personal, but it did take me a month of practice to stop shaking like a leaf on this stage. As I mentioned earlier, I like to play hockey, and in addition to playing on ice, little introverted me likes to join in on pickup games at a roller rink in a local park only about 2 miles from here. Typically, between 10 and 11 other people show up, and these are the kinds of guys that I would be way too shy to just sit down and have a coffee with. But the game of hockey offers a totally different environment. It occurs in a public park, so there's plenty of escapes, and people have mixed schedules and tire out all the time, so nobody really thinks twice if you pick up your gear and leave. The point of getting 12 people together at a rink is not to socialize, it's to play hockey. And the only socialization that happens during a hockey game is offensive and defensive callouts and idle chit-chat on the bench. I have played with these guys for only about 6 months, and not once have I seen them outside of that rink. And yet, off the top of my head, I could give you their names, educational backgrounds, fields of work, marital status, hobbies, pet peeves, recent vacation spots, recent important life events, and so on. Don't get me wrong, playing against these guys on the rink could be really intimidating because most of them are way too freaking good at hockey. But interacting with them socially, even as an introverted first-generation immigrant, has never been intimidating. It has never put me out of my comfort zone, all thanks to low-commitment interaction. Back at school, we wanted to apply this concept in the context of college persistence. If this rift, this barrier, this gap was happening between parents and school faculty, that's where the low-commitment interaction had to be deployed. Imagine a series of events. informal things, anything from cooking classes to woodcrafting workshops to movie nights. Things that target activities people already like to do, but simply offer them in an environment with more tools, better instruction, or perhaps just a different atmosphere that people might like. Parents and teachers would come to these events, and if they so choose, they could make their unique wooden key holders or bake their exquisite pierogi in silence. There would be no daunting emphasis on social interaction. However, inevitably, small, manageable interactions would begin to occur. Where did you find that chisel? Could you pass the salt? And because these events would occur week after week, month after month, slowly but surely, almost subconsciously, could you pass the salt would turn into how was your day? Would turn into how's my child doing in class? What are his or her college options? See, the point of these things isn't to force kids to go to college. It isn't even to convince parents that their college is their only and best option. It is solely to start a conversation, to give parents an alternate environment, a more comfortable environment in which to participate in their child's education. And over time, these teachers and faculty would turn from faceless strangers into friends. And it is so much easier to talk about your child's future with a friend than some nameless drone that belongs to the system. Of course, we couldn't just design a single activity. If we wanted to cater to all the different demographic groups in Chicago, we needed to create a process, something that custom generates unique events at unique times of the day, at unique days of the week, to cater to the very different lifestyles and interests of the very unique cultural enclaves throughout the city of Chicago. In order to do the research that would make this process possible, we as a group went to the annual educational summit in Pilsen, a predominantly Hispanic community area in Chicago. It was an optimal place to reach both parents and teachers, so we created a questionnaire that would tackle a lot of the what's, how's, and when's of our process. Knowing our audience, we printed a stack in English and a stack in Spanish. By the end of that day, 3 questionnaires were filled out in English, 43 were filled out in Spanish. It was awesome. Parents were excited, teachers were excited. But something else sticks out to me about that day, however. It was how a family came up to us and took a questionnaire, and the mom did this double take. She kind of looked at the paper, then back at us, back at the paper, then back at us. It was like being in an Old Spice commercial. And then her face lit up a little bit. And she asked, wait, you actually care about what we think? And in that moment, there were no walls, there was no sarcasm, there were no barriers. It was the most genuine and most real interaction. We were total outsiders. We were about as trustworthy as a stranger off the street. And yet, in that split second, there was a connection. There was hope. And that's when I realized that this whole low commitment interaction extends far beyond college persistence, far beyond schools, and far beyond job opportunities. In all of our communities, we have barriers that divide the different patches of our cultural fabric. Those freshmen we talked about, in years from now, may find themselves sitting on neat rows of chairs, clad in gowns with tassels hanging proudly from the left sides of their caps. Graduates. But we can begin to reap the benefits of low commitment interaction as soon as today. Everyone here now knows how to communicate with their neighbors, their acquaintances, their coworkers better than ever before. So go home tonight, play a pickup game of basketball with strangers at a park, go to a car show, sit down for a board game here at the library. The most committed of relationships often start with the least committed of interactions. And together we can use this concept to create strong bonds and connections that could never have existed otherwise. In your hands are all the tools you need to make this happen. And it all starts by passing the salt. Thank you.